In this video, I'll be talking about how I made my very own augmented reality comic. And this is a talk I gave for the Whip Comics group. And I'll be getting into some of the challenges I've faced, my journey so far as a comic creator, and some of the lessons I learned along the way. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. So my name's Greg. I'll be talking about augmented reality comics and sort of kind of sharing a bit about my journey over the last few years, sort of how I went about creating these sort of interactive comics and giving advice and kind of best practices when it comes to kind of making augmented reality comics and interactive comics in general. And sort of finally kind of looking ahead at kind of the future of comics, what it could potentially be, because hopefully the future is very bright for comics, but we'll get onto that later. So that's kind of like a really brief overview of the presentation. It's not going to be a crazy long 2-hour presentation. I'm going to try and keep it not too long because I think people get overwhelmed with the amount of information. But I'll talk a bit about sort of like the structure of the presentation as I go through. If you're on the social media, sorry, I have to throw this in, if you're on the social media, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube is kind of where I mostly hang out. My tag is @Riff Reality, unsurprisingly. I generally sort of post process videos, behind the scenes stuff about music, because I'm a massive fan about music. And sort of more recently, I've been doing kind of creative inspiration videos, which is a new thing I've started doing. So basically, this is the thumbnail of a video I put in for how to be more creative. It's a very professional thumbnail. As you can see, a very vibrant professional thumbnail. I don't know why it picked this particular thumbnail, but there we go. I thought, oh, well, that kind of looks cool. It's kind of on brand. So if you give me a follow anyway, if only for the thumbnail, give me a follow. So in terms of the contents, so I'll be talking a bit about sort of my background in terms of like my work and kind of what inspires me and what inspired me effectively to kind of become a comic creator. I'll be talking a bit about my journey so far and kind of all the kind of sort of steps I've been through to kind of get to where I'm at right now. There's a lot of sort of like bumps in the road, if you were, to try and get to where I'm at, and I'm still trying to work it out. And I'll be talking a bit about how augmented reality works, sort of like the nuts and bolts of how the technology works, and also the kind of platforms you can use to build your own app or your own web app, some of the platforms that are out there. Then I'll be doing sort of lessons and advice in terms of the things I've learned along the way, and advice I have if you're interested in doing sort of augmented reality stuff. Then I'll do sort of a thing as to why it matters. Why does augmented reality matter for us as comic creators and creators in general? And then finally, some final thoughts, sort of a bit more advice. And then we'll go into kind of Q&A and sort of general discussion at the end of the presentation. So cool. So yeah, hold your questions for later. If you've got any questions, feel free to give me a shout later. No worries. So in terms of my background and what I kind of do day to day for my job and sort of what inspired my creative style. So day to day, I'm a senior designer, illustrator, and developer. I've been freelance since 2014, so just over 10 years freelancing, but I've been working in the industry since like the early 2000s. I feel extremely old now because when I kind of first started, YouTube didn't exist. We didn't have the mobile phone was like a brick, and we didn't have much internet at all. It was extremely slow, and social media was MySpace. And I don't know if anyone else remembers those sorts of days. But it was sort of very early on when the web first started. And that's kind of how I began in my career. It's sort of like back in the day, just like coding little pages and stuff and not really understanding what I was doing. But now, being a freelancer and designer and developer, this is kind of my bread and butter of what I do day to day. But growing up, this is kind of some of the stuff that truly inspired me. So I was a kid of the 80s and the 90s and just super inspired by sort of anime like Dragon Ball and Akira. That was kind of like my go-to when I was like 12, 13 years old, just checking out these incredible animations and these incredible characters, like all these powered up characters and just the amazing kind of colors, and 80s cartoons as well, this kind of vibrant sort of neon look and feel. And I also had like a real soft spot for point and click games like Monkey Island, bottom right corner. It's like that I was just so inspired by, like, oh, I can move this little character around the screen and he can kind of talk to people, and like it's these amazingly vibrant backgrounds and stuff. And it was just super inspiring. And then sort of later in my teens, I got more into kind of music. I became sort of a very big rock and heavy metal fan in my sort of late teens, and I still am today. Still sort of my bread and butter in terms of the kind of gigs I go to. I also go to sort of like all kinds of gigs. I mean, I absolutely love music in general. So I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do as a job growing up. At one point, I was convinced I was going to be a roller coaster designer, but now I actually suffer from motion sickness. So I'm kind of glad that didn't happen, because that would have been kind of quite awkward and quite difficult to be designing roller coasters if you can't actually ride on them. So yeah, so that's kind of like an overview of myself in terms of my job and kind of what inspires me. And what I try and do is, so this is some of my client work over the years, and to be honest, I probably need to update it because it's kind of like some of this is a bit older. And what I've tried to do is incorporate my style in terms of my vibrant kind of like colors into my client work wherever I can kind of get away with it. So in my day job as a designer and illustrator, this is some of the client work I worked on over the years. And I love having a variety of things. I've been fortunate sort of to work on lots of different projects like Jamie Oliver, Rugby World Cup, and more recently, I began working with a large streaming company beginning with N. I can't say who, but you can probably figure out who that large company beginning with N might be. And I can't show any of the work, unfortunately, but let's just say it's been quite a fun project, and I hope to show it at some point soon. So my creative journey so far, so kind of like stepping through kind of all the little sort of little steps I've been through so far over the years, and it was quite interesting putting this together because I feel like I haven't kind of done it in the last few years, and I've just been kind of going on and on. So it kind of shows the progress, sort of where I kind of began and sort of where I'm at now. So back in 2014, when I went freelance, I started kind of doing these little personal projects on the side. And I sort of was what I was trying to do was trying to attract the kind of clients I wanted to work with. So like I wanted to do gig posters, t-shirt design. I even had like little plectrums I used to hand out as a little freebie with my little mantra, which was creativity, design, and rock and roll. And I used to hand those out and stuff like a little business card almost. And it's sort of basically I just wanted to try and get this kind of work. And I almost managed to bag an album cover, but then the pandemic hit and I basically lost the work, which was like super disappointing because I had like a record label. I had literally had the head of the record label on the phone with me. And he's like, yeah, I really like this design. We're going to use it for this band. I thought, oh, finally I get an album cover. How cool would that be? And then the pandemic hit. So I completely lost that job, which was one of those things, you kind of just take it for what it is. So yeah, I try and do these like sort of fun little projects. And so since 2014, I was doing that because I found that when you're doing your freelancing can be very dull. You get a lot of boring jobs sometimes and you need something to kind of keep yourself creatively occupied. So yeah. And what's another funny fact is this Def Leppard poster. So I always get asked, oh, do you sell this Def Leppard poster? And I'm like, no, unfortunately I don't, because obviously I don't own the rights to the logo. So I can't just like go and sell it, and get sued. But it's funny, it's almost on a weekly basis. Oh, do you sell that Def Leppard poster? It's like, no, I don't, unfortunately. I do sell the artwork on its own, but I don't sell it with it like in the poster format. So yeah, it's a little funny little story there. So that's kind of like, I started doing these personal projects. And kind of before I knew it, sort of over the years, I'd kind of been doing these little illustration projects. And somehow I started to sort of develop this kind of universe of characters. over the years, and it sort of happened by chance. I wasn't planning on making like a bunch of characters that all fit together or anything. It was just sort of like year by year, just making these little illustrations as a project. And somebody, I think it was a few of my friends, sort of said, "Oh, do they all kind of fit together in the same universe or something? Or are they all part of this? Or they all live in the same world?" I think somebody said, and I was like, I didn't really think about it, and I thought, oh, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I should try and sort of make this into something a bit more. So 2020 rolled round, and yeah, we all kind of know what happened in 2020. Not the best year, I think, for anyone, and effectively I had some client work, but it was very, very slow. There wasn't really a huge amount going on. So I was just like, well, I just have all this time on my hands. I need to kind of get my head into something. And it's just like I just want to get my head into something and kind of do a project, because if I don't, then I'll probably go crazy if I'm not doing some sort of creative project. So, 2020, I had all this spare time. I was like, well, maybe I should try and do something with these characters. Maybe I should try and put them together somehow. And sort of back in 2011, I think it was, I was kind of putting together like a loose story for something. I had this story in my head, but it was like just like a couple of notes written on paper. Wasn't particularly, anything poignant. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll kind of resurface this idea that I had back in the day. And being such a huge fan of music, I wanted music to be the main theme of the whole comic, because I absolutely love music. It's been my inspiration, saved me several times in my life. So I just felt like, right, this is, music is the ultimate power. And I started sort of creating the origin story, which introduced everybody to kind of like these gods of music, and this guy who's basically, his sister has disappeared mysteriously, and all that's been left behind is this plectrum. This like mysterious kind of glowing plectrum is the only thing that was left of her, and so he starts going on the hunt, trying to find out where she's gone, seeing as she mysteriously vanished. So that was kind of like the beginnings of the origin story back in 2020. And after a few weeks of work, well, actually, I think it was more like a few months, to be honest with you, I'd kind of finalized the logo, and I put together a little teaser trailer, which I won't play the whole thing. You can see it on YouTube. If you check out my YouTube a bit later, I've still got the trailer there, and it had like music and everything. And I created this little trailer in After Effects. It took me a few weeks, and I finally had the logo kind of zooming in everything. And it was a case of like, oh yeah, this could be something. This potentially has got some legs. And I felt sort of quite inspired by kind of like, sometimes when you finish a project sort of like this, you think, that was really difficult, and then you're not 100% creatively satisfied with it. I don't know if that happens with anyone else. Sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I could have done better. But in this case, I was actually really happy with the result, which doesn't happen very often. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm onto something here. I'm actually quite happy with how this turned out. And even today, like I look at it now, I think, oh, could tweak a couple of things, but I think overall it still looks cool. And so moving on, I kind of decided, right, well, now I've got this logo, and I've got an idea and a little bit of a story. I'm going to post one panel a day on social media. I don't know if anyone else has ever done these Inktober or Drawtober type things. So back in 2020, I was like, right, I'm going to create a panel every day digitally, and literally the caption is going to, in the social media post, is going to be, how this journey starts effectively. Each day there'll be a different caption on each post. And that's how it started, posting this panel a day for 31 days, which was a bit of a slog, to be honest with you. I wasn't used to kind of creating artwork every day and pushing it out there every day. So that was kind of a bit of a slog. But I managed to do it. And so after that, I took a little bit of a break from the comic, because, to be honest with you, I was a little bit burnt out, having created that one post a day. And also with the pandemic as well, it was just like, we just come out of this pandemic and I was just trying to readjust to normal life, because, things obviously were so crazy back then. It was just like, well, I don't really have the energy to put my focus into this. And I wasn't really sure where the comic was going either. I was sort of like, should I continue this, or should I, what should I do? So I also got very busy as well with client work, and I kind of developed this little educational game for a client, and I finally got to work on a point and click adventure game for which was like a dream come true for me, because I was a huge fan of Monkey Island and stuff. So you have like this little character who walks around, and it was the first time I'd ever developed an Apple and an Android app, because the tender basically said you have to develop an Android and an Apple app. It has to be in the App Store. So this was my first experience of actually developing like a little game that could actually go into the app stores. So, and this was quite crucial for kind of like the next part of my comic project, because if I hadn't kind of done this homework first of understanding how to build this little app, who knows where it could have gone. I may not have created an app in the end. So I was quite fortunate to work on this project, and so I took a break from the comic in this year, and I just focused solely on making this little game for a client. Rolling around to 2022, and I thought, well, maybe I could pick up that comic project again. And what I learned from doing this stuff with this client, maybe I can kind of introduce it into the comic somehow. Maybe I can find a way somehow of like adding interactivity, maybe making it animate or something, because I felt like I had to kind of sort of renew my passion for it a bit. I was like, well, I want it to animate, I want it to move, I want it to be, moving around, have music, I want it to do stuff. So in 2022, I built this little app, a kind of little web app, where as you scroll along, like the panels animate in, and everything kind of works on a mobile, but it also kind of works on a desktop. It's all within the browser. And so it was sort of like I used the same framework I built that game in to develop this. I used exactly the same framework because I was like, I know what I want to do. I know how to do it now. And so I launched this in 2022 as a free origin story that you can go on my website. It's still there now, riffreality.com/origins. You can still kind of scroll through it and check it out. And using kind of like that development experience, I managed to kind of introduce this scrollable comic, which I really enjoyed doing. The comic has evolved a lot since then, but I still feel like this is like a really nice way to kind of read a comic in a way. It's having like all these little animations playing and the music and stuff. So that's kind of where it got up to in 2022. But then moving on to 2023. I found Whip for the first time. Yay. I'd been looking for kind of like a comic creator meetup. I hadn't really found anything else, and I kind of stumbled upon Whip, and I was a bit disappointed at first because Whip kind of only had like online meetups, but then I saw, oh, now and again they do meet in person. That's great. So I decided to join, and I went to my first Whip meetup, and I remember very well. I met Claudio, I met a few other people as well for the first time, and I if I'm honest, I felt a little bit out of place because everybody had like these lovely printed comics, these beautiful printed comics, and there's me with like an iPad. Oh, here's my scrolling comic. So I felt extremely out of place, but people were very welcoming and very, very nice. And so just like joining Whip was like probably one of the best things I could have done, to be honest with you. I think as comic creators and creators in general, creativity in general is quite a lonely journey. And sometimes having like-minded people you can bounce ideas off, see what they're working on, get inspired by what they're working on is really great. So joining Whip, probably one of the best things I ever did. So yeah, thanks Whip. And so that year, I contributed to the Change anthology. I didn't even know what an anthology was. I had no idea. And I was like, what's an anthology? And then I got told, we get this book together. I think this is before we started doing Kickstarter. Joe used to just get it together and stuff. So I contributed to that. I did a 4-page comic. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing because I was so used to kind of working digitally. Didn't understand sort of like how to do paneling and stuff like that. I had to kind of work it all out myself, which was like a really baptism of fire. But the result was really good. I really enjoyed kind of like the result of that particular comic, and I'm still actually one of my favorite ones that I've done so far. So joining Whip was great, and then what I found was like a lot of people. I showed them my scrollable origin story and stuff, and they were like, "Well, why don't you make like a printed version? You know, that would be really cool. Why don't you? I can see this, being in a printed version." I was like, I hadn't really thought about that, really, to be honest. So later that year, that same year, 2023, I launched the printed version for the first time. Again, I wasn't used to doing printed stuff, so I had no idea. So I got a lot of information from Whip about how to make printed stuff. But I wasn't 100% satisfied. With me, it's always a case of like, well, it's printed, that's cool. But I didn't want to get away from this idea of not having any interactivity. I built this interactive comic online. I was like, well, I don't want to kind of abandon that idea of like interactivity and music and all the rest of it. I wanted to kind of push it a bit further, and I wanted to find a way of making the printed version move. So later in 2023, October, which is actually when I launched the printed version, I made an augmented reality app for the first time. I'd never developed one ever before, and it was sort of a real baptism of fire. The amount of work that I had to put into it, even being a web developer, it's like a huge amount of work to kind of get it done. But it looked like I was really pleased with how it looked, and how like just you can literally just move things around and it just follows. And it just like kind of like when I first saw it working, I was like, wow, this could really work. This is something sort of, technology has come a long way. Because back in the day, I actually tried to do augmented reality. I think it was 2019, and it was so bad. It was so jerky. I was just like, oh, this is terrible. And you needed like a QR code and all that, and it was so fiddly. But now, it's like we can actually get, you literally scan an image and then something can happen. And so I was really pleased with kind of how it looked, but I went through a lot of pain to get it there, which I'll explain a bit more about later in the presentation. I also developed, this is kind of really cool, as like a little AR game, a little augmented reality game. So you actually walk along, go into this portal. You can basically place a portal wherever you want, and then you're kind of like teleported into this sort of other part of reality, which is kind of part of the story, is the idea of gates opening and people being transported to other worlds and things like that. So that was kind of part of the story. And so I developed this little AR kind of game which is inside the app. And as you can see, you can adjust the immersion, so you can see around you in real life, and then you can kind of adjust it. And then the idea is like there's this little game inside where you shoot these little asteroids as a fun little sort of side game as such, which is quite fun. And there's an interesting story behind this, is that I didn't initially want to do this, but there was a reason why I had to make this game, and it looked cool and stuff, but it's just, it was a lot of work. But I'll explain a little bit why I had to make this little game. And then someone in Whip said to me, oh, why don't you try tabling? I was like, what's tabling? Like, what is it? Is it something where I kind of lie on a table with my artwork or something, and I sort of sit there with my comic on my chest or something? Or is it like, do I lie on a pool table? Or do I have to sort of embrace my inner cat and start sort of like connecting to my inner cat somehow and just lying on a table? So I wasn't quite sure what tabling was. And to be honest with you, the way I feel right now in terms of like posting on social media, I look like the cat right now. That's how I feel inside. It's just burnt out from posting on social media. So I wasn't quite sure what tabling was, but I think this may have been it, but no. So somebody explained what tabling actually was, which meant actually going to conventions and setting up a stand for my comic, which I was like, okay, that's cool. I understand now. Previously, I was super confused what tabling meant. So in 2024, I tabled for the first time, which was like quite a mind-blowing experience. I didn't even sort of realize you could do that. And I took the project on the road for the first time while also kind of creating the next bit of the story. So I applied for a few fairs and conventions. Like I said, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I learned how to build a stand on YouTube. YouTube is just amazing for this sort of thing. You can literally just go on YouTube and they'll tell you exactly what you have to do. And here's like a little video of the stand from last year. So I've been updated a little bit since then. But I use like these grid cubes that you can buy off Amazon, and I just started putting together this stand, and I bought like a roller banner, and I got some advice from the guys in Whip as well as to what to do when it comes to building stuff and all the rest of it. So Whip was really helpful in that respect. And I knew I wanted to match the branding of the comic. I thought, oh, it's super important. I have some neon lights. I have to put some neon lights in there somewhere. So I got those up and running. But in all honesty, it was really rough, and I'm sure a lot of other creators here who've tabled can tell you that when you first start doing it and selling, it's a real rough go. Like, people at these conventions, they tend to gravitate to kind of fan art. So it's kind of when you're trying to sell something unique or different, they're not necessarily going to come and see it. So having like the augmented reality stuff, having my little iPad set up where like people were kind of like really confused. Like, they were like, how does that work? So it was a real talking point, and kind of a unique selling point of the comic was like, oh, it animates and stuff. So so that's kind of like a really good piece of advice, is having something unique to show people as a talking point is really good. And so I learned a lot from tabling in 2024. I've got a couple of events lined up this year as well. But yeah, so tabling in 2024. And I also started sort of writing the next part of the comic, chapter 1. And the original sort of release date for this was winter 2023. And I stupidly put, at the end of the first origin story, I put, coming soon in winter 2023. And here we are in 2025, and I've released it. So as a little tip for everybody, if you ever release a comic book, don't put the date when the next one's going to come out, because more than likely you'll probably miss the date in all likelihood. So don't put the date when it's going to come out. And this is probably like one of the most, well, probably the most popular character from the new one is this little fox. He's like, everyone I've talked to so far is like, oh, what's up with the fox? So that's really cool. It's like I created this character that people are kind of interested in. So yeah, so he's quite sort of a mysterious fox. So 2025, here we are, all up to date. So finally, I got to the point where I actually finished the story and launched it last month. So this is what it looks like. So this is like the front cover. These are some of the inner pages. And for the first time, I started doing paneling and stuff. Whereas in the previous comic, it was just like one page. Each page was like a panel, if you think about it. Because it was digital with a scrollable format initially. Now it was like this proper paneling, there's conversations between characters and all the rest of it. And finally, I've got like a bunch of new characters in this story that I've been wanting to tell for so many years. And it was great to finally have all these new characters that I've had these characters under wraps for probably about 2.5 years at least, some of them. And some of them even longer. Had been sort of sitting there, and I didn't feel like I wanted to put them out there yet. So it was really great to finally actually kind of have all these characters out and about. So yeah, so this is like the new comic, and then like the little augmented cover that comes in. And it was like a huge difference to the first comic in terms of like there's 81 panels in the new comic compared to the 31 of the previous one. And each panel is like a piece of artwork in a way. It's like I draw it full size, so it takes a bit longer. And so I was finally glad to finally have this out and about, out in the open, and launched it at Illustrators Fair in July a few weeks ago. So the stand looks kind of similar, but I've got this extra little comic now, which is great. So there we go. So that's kind of where I'm up to right now. After that long journey, the journey is still going, but now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the augmented reality stuff, how it works, how to implement it, and sort of the things I've learnt over the last sort of 2.5 years, I suppose, of developing all this stuff. So, for those who may or may not know, so the way it works, the augmented reality stuff, is you start with a reference image in your app. So the reference image can be either like a JPEG or a PNG of your artwork, and what you do is you get your device, and the code, when it detects that image, it says, I recognize that image. I'm going to do something now with that image. So, and then what you can do is you can effectively either overlay something on top of that detected image, or you can do some animation or whatever. So this is kind of like a very broad way of like how it works. And it can be an image printed, or you could have the image on another screen. So if you have a desktop, you could point your camera at the screen and the same effect will happen. Things you have to be a bit mindful of are things like glare or reflection, because if you're in daylight and things reflect, the camera can't necessarily pick up the image very well, so you get a bit of a glitchy kind of thing going on. But it tends to be fine. I haven't had too many problems. The technology's kind of come a long way now where it doesn't really sort of like have too many problems unless you're like in really bright sunshine. So how it works for mine in particular is I have my reference images in my database in my app. So I have like 20 or 30 of these currently. I create like a flat 3D object in the app called a plane, or like a rectangle, if you will. And that is mapped to the either the cover or one of the pages. So it's like a flat object. And that can be tracked in with the camera on the app. And the tracking now is kind of at the point where it's so good. Like back in the day when I first tried all this, it was so bad. Like it would lose the thing would go off the screen and all the rest of it. It would end up sort of like somewhere down the hall or something probably. But now it's so accurate the way you can track stuff. It's amazing. And once you've done that, you've got this kind of 3D plane attached to the object based on that image. You can then apply like a video, or you can apply a 3D object. You could put like a 3D little character or something that animates. And that's something kind of I want to look into at some point, is like maybe developing like 3D characters and like having like 3D stuff pop out the page or whatever. It's something I want to look into. It's just finding the time to kind of look into all that stuff. So that's kind of like a broad overview of how it works. And, you know, all you need is like a camera, a device like a phone or a tablet, and, you know, a bit of code and a bit of an app to get you going. So in terms of development options, so there's a few different platforms you can use. Now, these are the ones I researched 2 years ago. So there may be new ones that have come out since then. There may very well have changed. I don't know. I can only speak from like the experience of using the one that I'm currently using. So the first one I looked into, being a web developer, was A-Frame. And I kind of look at the pros and cons of each one, because you have to be very sort of mindful. If you're interested in doing something like this, you have to be quite mindful as to like, okay, you don't want to spend a lot of time creating and developing something only to be like, okay, this isn't going to work. I need to move on to something different, because that's the pitfall. It's like I started doing a bit of development using this platform, A-Frame, which, you know, it's a cool platform. It's free. It's open source. It's easy to use if you're a web developer, because me being a web developer by trade, I was like, right, I understand what I'm doing, a bit of JavaScript, etc. But the drawbacks of it was every time I tried to use it in like a mobile browser, like Safari, it was so jerky. Like you could barely track anything. I mean, it was really, really bad. And there was sort of lots of compatibility issues as well. Like certain browsers didn't work correctly. So when you're trying to test for these sorts of things, it was very difficult to use in that respect. So ultimately, it wasn't great. I was kind of disappointed, if I'm honest, because I would have loved to have just like an open source, free kind of like platform to use. But unfortunately, it may be better now. I don't know. It could potentially be better, but worth exploring potentially, as it's kind of like a good way to kind of start and understand how it works. But for me, it was like, well, there was too many issues. So I abandoned this one quite quickly. And then I looked into Unity. I don't know if some of you may have heard of Unity before. It's mostly a game kind of creation platform. So a lot of the games that you find in the app stores were probably made with Unity. This is sort of like you pay, I think it's free for a certain amount of time, and then you have to pay like a license fee. Is kind of how it works. And I looked at this next and I thought, oh, this is cool. You know, the great thing with this is that you develop one app and then you can push it to Apple and Android and done. You know, you don't have to worry about sort of developing two different apps. So I thought, oh, this is great. You know, this is great. Fantastic. But then there was a lot of sort of like hoo-ha that went on in the media, and I don't know if anyone knows what happened. But basically, they decided all of a sudden to start charging people for every download of an app. So basically, if you had an app that had like 1 million downloads and it was a free app, you would get charged by them for that 1 million downloads, which is the most ridiculous thing. To the point where if you read up on it, the CEO actually resigned from the company because the community backlash was huge. Like people left in droves this whole platform because of like, you had people who had like these apps that were super popular getting loads of downloads for free, and they're getting charged like whatever it was, like 10 cents a download or $1 a download or something stupid. And I think one person said, "Oh, I owe them like $500,000 now." It's just like ridiculous. So I moved very, very quickly away from Unity. I never tried. I think I installed it and had a little fiddle around with it, but I never actually kind of went further than that. And ultimately, it's a great platform. I might move back there one day. I might go back and redevelop my apps eventually to this. But I would suggest that maybe you try another option first, because they may start charging for things. I mean, who knows? They may start charging for stuff. So just be a bit mindful of Unity. And then the third option, which is what I went with eventually, was basically just using the standard development sort of software that comes with a Mac. If you have a Mac, you can develop Apple stuff. I don't know if you can develop Apple stuff on a PC now. Maybe you can. But I think, you need a Mac for that. So Apple Xcode is what... Oh, you can't. Apple reining it in with their wall garden, aren't they? So Apple Xcode and Google Android Studio are the two apps that I use to develop my app. And the great benefit of this is you are using the original software. So you are using the original development software as intended for these devices. You're not like going, right, I'm going to use some sort of third-party thing and have issues with compatibility. You're using the software as it's intended to be used, which is great. So you get way more documentation. You even get things like early releases. So when Apple bring out the next version of iOS, you will be able to test your app on that in advance, being a developer, which is great. You can test all your stuff way in advance. And to be honest, being a developer on Apple, it's not too expensive considering. I think it's like $79 a year or something you pay. It's not too expensive. I think Google's like $40. But basically, this is the route I went. And the only kind of like main drawbacks are it's a way steeper learning curve because Xcode and Android Studio use two completely different programming languages. So you can't just copy paste, unfortunately. So you have to develop two different apps to do the same thing, which is what I did. And even as a web developer, it was kind of like quite a steep learning curve to like learn how to code on both of these. And my Android app, I actually ended up developing much later. I think it was like a year or so after people had been asking, like, have you done on Android? But, I finally got it out. And there may be more options, but these are like the main three options that I know of in terms of developing augmented reality stuff. There may be more out there, but these are like the three that I know of. And I think if you were to start, I would say maybe try this platform, A-Frame, because it's kind of a bit more accessible. Like you don't have to pay anything. You can just try it. I tried it a couple of years ago. It didn't work very well, but maybe now they may have resolved a lot of the issues. I don't know. It's worth trying out, I think. If you're interested at all in any of this, you could give it a go. It's completely free. You can just download it and there's examples and everything. So maybe give it a go with this. And then Unity, you could have a little go on as well. I think that's free for a certain point. I mean, you can probably just test it out locally just to have a go. And I think with Unity, the great thing is you get people kind of have like their little templates and you can download a template. So it's kind of already done. You don't have to worry too much about sort of like doing it from scratch. So that's kind of a good thing. But if you really kind of like want to, do it the sort of the most streamlined way, I would say, in a way, and kind of like the most safest way, if you really want to put all your eggs in one basket, I would go with the native development software, because that's what I've done. Because I knew this is what I want to do. This is how I want my comic to be. So I don't want to get locked out with any kind of subscription fees or whatever later down the line. I'd rather use the software as it's supposed to be. So those are kind of like the three main options for developing augmented reality stuff. And hopefully you're still there and I haven't lost you, because obviously it's a lot of information. So what have I learned? So I'm going to give you a bit of advice as to like, because these platforms are great, no problem, but there's a lot of little pitfalls that you don't know about until you start getting further down the rabbit hole. You start to realize, okay, this is where it gets a little bit complicated sometimes. So the first thing is that reference images, which we talked about before, these are like the PNGs and the JPEGs, where you put your JPEG in and it's like, oh, I understand what that JPEG is. Great, I'll put a video on top of it, no problem. So that's what a reference image is. So they are very fussy, very, very fussy. So when you're developing in Xcode, you'll start to get all these kind of little warnings that come up. AR reference image is too similar to this image. And I was like, what's going on here? Because what I wanted to do in my original origin story is I wanted every single page to animate. That's what I wanted. That was my initial plan, right? I want all the pages in my comic to animate. Great. No, you can't. So basically, and there may be a way around this now. I need to kind of do a bit more research. If you have, for example, here's my cover of my latest comic, and then you have like a similar piece of artwork on another page, it'll be like, nope, these are too similar. I can't use those because it gets confused. It doesn't understand the difference between them. It has to be very, very different for it to understand that, okay, these are two different things and I can put something else on that one and put something else on this one. So that's a real sort of like, gotcha kind of moment for me, was like, oh, I can't use two of the same pages that look similar. So that's like a real big point of note, is don't use similar images. It won't like it. And like I said, there might be a way around it now. I need to kind of do a bit of research. I think that programmatically you may be able to do it that way. I'm not sure. And then the other thing why I couldn't use all my images in my comic, which is very frustrating, is if your image, like your panel or whatever, doesn't have enough contrasting elements, what's called a histogram, which I had to look up a histogram. I didn't understand what it was when this warning first came up. Is that if it's too kind of like the same color, or there's not enough elements on the screen for it to understand what it is, it'll say the histogram's too narrow, and you need, it's not going to work. So when you try and like use the phone when you're hovering over it, it'll just start flickering. It won't know. It won't understand. But Apple is great at warning you about these things. Android less so. Android will be just like, yeah, no, it's not going to work. And at least with Apple, it'll tell you, no, this isn't going to be a problem. You're going to have a problem here. So this is just one of the main things to be aware of if you're playing about with augmented reality, is like you can't have two images that are too similar, and your image must have enough contrasting elements. This is like super important, because like if I'd have known this at the beginning, it would have been like I would have done it a different way. I would have probably made my panels look all completely different, and I wouldn't reuse the same art and stuff like that. So yeah. So maybe down the line they'll fix it. Maybe it's like it's just a restriction of the technology itself at the moment. It's just one of those things where you have to kind of just deal with it, unfortunately. And but hopefully moving forwards they'll kind of do something about it, and maybe at some point we won't have these sorts of restrictions. So lesson number 2. Test on real devices. Now this was a silly mistake I made at the beginning. Because when I started developing this, I was like, oh, it's just a blank screen. Well, there must be something wrong. There must be something wrong with my code. It must not be working correctly. No. So if you use the simulator in Xcode for Apple, and similar for Android as well, you don't get a camera. You can't like simulate the app on a desktop computer. You have to install it onto a real device. Don't rely on like what the simulator is showing you, because it'll probably be wrong. It's fine for like laying out elements and stuff, but the actual like you won't get any kind of video at all, unfortunately. With Android, it's a little bit different because you can attach a webcam, but unfortunately the webcam has no gyroscope. So when you're moving it around, and this was a problem I had on Android, was like I was moving the camera around in the simulator, like, oh, I'm sure it'll work. It doesn't work. It wouldn't pick anything up because there's no gyroscope in the camera. On a webcam, so it's not going to understand the orientation and all the rest of it. So always use a real device when you're developing stuff. Always use a real device. Never use a simulator. And then lesson number 3, and this is like the biggest learning of the whole thing. And you may remember I talked a bit about the game that I had to develop. There is a reason for that. So the hardest part of actually developing an augmented reality app isn't doing the app. The hardest part is actually getting it approved on the app stores. It is really hard. And I absolutely love this David Bowie quote, is always go a little bit further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. You go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting. And I absolutely love this quote. And it's sort of my mantra of kind of like, just push it a little bit further, get a little bit uncomfortable. But to be honest with you, I was completely out of my depth at this point. Apple was the big fish, and I was just this little damsel in distress on the little cliff at this point. I was completely out of my depth. Apple, a big fish. So what happened was my app got rejected in July 2023. I'm all set to launch my comic. I've got everything lined up. I'm like, I've created this amazing app. Boom, got rejected when I tried to upload it. And if you know Apple, it's really difficult to kind of install apps onto devices. Like, they restrict you so much. You can't just be like, right, here you go, here's the app, download it. You have to go through the App Store. So it's really, really difficult to kind of put your app there. So they rejected me. They said all augmented reality experiences should be really rich and integrated. Just putting a model in there or animation is not enough. So this was a massive learning for me. It's like, you can't just make it animate. You have to make it like an experience. They won't approve it. And what confused me was there was a lot of apps in the App Store that did this. They literally just played an animation. So I was like, well, why can't mine just do that? And I think what it was, they snuck in their apps back in the day when they didn't have these guidelines. And now they've got these guidelines where they're like, nope, you can't just... They must have had like a deluge of loads of apps where it just plays an animation. They're like, nope, you need to make it so it's an experience. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So this is why I developed this game. I developed this game so that I could actually get my app approved. I had to build it, and it took 3 months to build this game. Trying to understand, because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even have any idea what I was doing initially. I was like, how am I going to solve it? What do they mean by integrated experiences? I've got no idea. And so it took 3 months out of my time to get this done. And my whole comic was like set back by 3 months. It was supposed to launch in July. Then it launched in October, like 3 months later. So I had people saying, oh, where's your comic? And all the rest of it. It looks really cool. I'm like, well, I can't launch it yet because of Apple. They make it very difficult to distribute the app outside the App Store, unfortunately. So that would be my advice. If you're looking into this and launching an app, allow some time to get it approved. Because this took 3 months out of my time just to get it into the App Store. So lesson number 3, make sure you make it an integrated experience for Apple, because that's what they want. Okay, and so the next section, possibly the most, it looks awesome. Oh, thank you. It does look awesome, but it took frickin' ages to make, and it was a real setback. So possibly the most important section, because, why does this augmented reality stuff matter? Because I can see the glazed eyes in the audience and what people are thinking. I'm just a comic creator. Why would I care about all this AR stuff? And I had to put my John Travolta gif in there because it's just like so relevant right now. I absolutely love Pulp Fiction. It's like my favorite movie of all time. So I had to throw that in there. So this is basically all the comic creators in the audience right now. It's like, well, why? This seems like a lot of work. It sounds very complicated. Like, why on earth would I spend all my time? I just want to make comics. And I'm the same. I'm similar. But as creators, we need to take the next wave of new technology extremely seriously. Because all we have to do is kind of look back at like the history of technology and what things have kind of come before. So in the 50s, we had TV. Then we suddenly had desktop in the 80s and the 2000s. Then we had the smartphone. All of a sudden, this smartphone pops up, the iPhone 2006, and everybody's like, well, what's this? Like, this is amazing. And now what's coming next is obviously smart glasses, which my prediction is that probably by 2035, we may have something which is usable. And I think ultimately, if we don't take these sort of technologies seriously, we will potentially get left behind as creators. And I feel like if you don't look at it now and sort of try and understand how it works, then you might get left behind. And, unfortunately, AI is the most recent example of this. And I can hear the boos in the audience already. AI is here. And, it came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, I see people like I had we had a friend over this weekend, and her daughter's like generating like a pink flamingo on her ChatGPT. I'm like, that would have taken me all day to make that, if not longer, and she did it in like a few seconds. I'm like, it's scary times. So I think if we don't take new technology seriously, we will get left behind. So we have to keep looking at it. Have to keep kind of keeping up to date with what's going on and trying things. Just give it a go. It's not going to do you any harm. Just try things and see if it works. Because ultimately, this is where we're at now, which is pretty awful, to be honest with you. They're very bulky. These augmented reality headsets, super expensive. I mean, you look at the Vision Pro. I had to look at this thing in the Apple Store, and I was like, I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's really bulky, and then it's like $3.5K for this headset, really. And the other thing as well is my app isn't compatible with either of these, so I kind of need to have a look at how that works a bit later down the line. But yeah, but what's interesting is kind of an interesting parallel. This is very bulky and not cheap. It might remind you of another device from the 80s, which was also bulky and not cheap. So I don't know if anyone else remembers these things back in the 80s. This is the mobile phone from the 80s. This is what it used to look like, was an absolute brick, and just sat there. And it was so expensive. And so the parallels are there in terms of technology. It's like, this is where we're at. And this is where mobile phones used to be at. And then you think about where they're at now compared, it's such a difference. So basically, this is where it's headed, ultimately. We're going to probably have smart glasses of some sorts. I reckon in the next 5 to 10 years, could even be sooner. Not sure. And that means that, that is going to be the platform. That is where everything's going to be. And then maybe we might even get contact lenses for those who actually want to wear contact lenses, like 2050. It could be a little bit after that. I'm not sure. But the technology is going to get down to the point where it gets like sort of smaller and smaller and smaller. And so, print isn't really dead if you think about it. It's going to be augmented. Because as humans, even though we're going to have all these smart glasses and all that and contact lenses, we're still going to want to hold things. We're still going to want to have stuff where we're holding stuff and looking at stuff, because we're tactile. As humans, we like to hold things. We like physical objects. So I think print is going to suddenly have a huge resurgence, and augmented reality will be because of that. It'll have a huge resurgence. People will want these interactive books and all the rest of it. And the smartphone is eventually going to end up here. It's eventually going to go like the Nokia, like the BlackBerry, all these other devices. It's eventually going to be in landfill, unfortunately. So as a creator, you really kind of need to keep up to date with all these sorts of things, I think. And sort of, I put my head in the sand with AI for a bit, and I kind of regret that I did. So don't do the same with augmented reality. Make sure you have a look at how it works. Try it out. There's free stuff out there you can use to give it a go. Because for better or worse, the technology stuff is here to stay, at the end of the day. And it's only going to get sort of more crazy as it goes. So, some final thoughts about all this. So as comic creators, to stand out nowadays, you kind of need a unique selling point. And when we get into comics, we tend to get into comics because we love stories. We don't necessarily think about it as a business or as a career goal. So thinking a bit about what makes you unique, or what your style is, or whatever, things we can, help you consider what is it that really is your unique selling point. So for me, it's the vibrant colors and the augmented reality have become two of my USPs at the moment. A lot of people say, "Oh yeah, you're the guy with the augmented reality, vibrant comic." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." So it's having that unique selling point. If we're thinking about doing this as a career or as a business, it's having that unique selling point is super important. And this is how having a truly unique creative voice and just being your authentic self is so important. And here we go, a bit of animation there. Forgot to play it. So yeah, finding a creative voice is something, it takes a long time and you have to be patient with it. And this is something I struggle with. I know a lot of other creators kind of struggle with it as well, as sort of trying to find like, what is my thing? What do I enjoy doing? And my advice is obviously just to be patient, because like for me, it's like over the last 10 years, I've been doing these things for like over 10 years now, every year, sort of churning away, trying to kind of like find what it is that I'm doing. And now it's only sort of since 2020 onwards that I've started to feel like I kind of know where I'm going. And I feel like storytelling is what I want to do in an interactive kind of augmented way. But, it takes a long time. It takes ages. So I think keep it going, keep motivated, be patient. It takes a long time to find your creative voice. I mean, here it's like over 10 years. And even then, I was probably drawing before that as well. So it takes a long time. Be patient with yourself. So what is next for Riff Reality? So the first thing is I'm going to finish up my Whip anthology entry, which is all about music pirates. You may have seen clips of this online. Basically, it's like all the services from back in the day, like LimeWire and Kazaa, become like pirates, and they go pillaging like all the MP3s and all the rest of it. So that's what's next, and I think Mike is probably frowning in a corner somewhere because I haven't sent it over to Mike yet. So make sure you get your Whip entries in for your anthology if you haven't done it yet. I'm going to be launching a new comic in November, which is basically taking the previous 2 anthology entries I did for 23 and 24 and merging that into a new comic, which will be extended. So there's going to be like an extra 8, 9 pages, 10 pages, whatever at the end. So that'll wrap up that story finally. And I'll be launching it at Thought Bubble. I don't know if anyone else is going to Thought Bubble as well, which is like one of the most iconic conventions. Obviously, I've never been to Thought Bubble, but I'm really looking forward to exhibiting there. I know, like, obviously it's very indie comic creator focused, so that's like sounds perfect for what I'm trying to do. And then finally, I'll start working on Chapter 2. I haven't put the release date on the back of Chapter 1. I learnt my lesson. I haven't put any release dates in my comic. It's all good. So be launching that next year and hoping to get that out, I think probably in July or something like that. Probably for Illustrators Fair next year is when I'm actually going to be trying to get that launched. So that's kind of what's coming up for me. And then just to add to the more work that I already have, I've sort of started updating my YouTube channel. And sort of planning on sort of adding new videos there because I registered it. I think it was the last talk I did for Whip was 2023. So that talk is actually on there and I haven't really updated it much. But basically, I'm going to start putting some comic reveals and character reveals on there. Doing some behind the scenes stuff on there. Bit of advice on interactive comics, a bit like what I've been talking about today. Tabling advice, this is something I really want to start doing, is actually giving advice to people who have never tabled before and stuff. I think tabling is a real cool experience, and I think every comic creator should try it at least once just to give it a go. So I'll be doing some tabling advice, how to build a stand and all these sorts of things. I'll be doing some discussions on music, creative inspiration, and some live streams hopefully as well. So please give it a subscribe if you're interested in that sort of thing, youtube.com/riffreality. And that's it. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll do a bit of a Q&A and discussion shortly. But in the infamous words of Banksy, exit through the gift shop. So if you have any interest in trying out some of my comics, you can grab them from the online shop, which is here, riffreality.com/shop. And I'll even throw in a free sticker as well, if you're lucky. So thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.